Hey, that's right. Greetings and happy Easter, fellow armchair Imagineers. Tiki here.
And BlueDragonFive.
And welcome. Oh my god, are you doing a Ramesses thing, Dragon?
Well, not if you don't like it.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I don't want to disencourage you. Welcome to our very special Egypt themed, Easter themed edition, I should say, of The Prince of Egypt. Dragon, this is a very highly anticipated retrospective podcast of ours. I feel like it's been on our wheel list. You know, it's been in our wheelhouse forever. It's been kind of like one of those things that's just been kind of like looming. You know, it's kind of like an iron giant or something like that. It's kind of like one of those titans of the animation industry that you eventually have to tackle, but you don't really know when. And Dragon, since the good folks at the Just Giggle It Discord page requested this, my golly gee whiz, we're going to do it. And Dragon, just to get into my thesis, just go to the Just Giggle It Discord page, folks. I'll have a link in the description. All kinds of awesome conversation, community building. Joshua Thomas is on there teasing episode 6 of Harley Quinn and the Joker versus the real world from time to time. Lots of cool, fun happenings there that I am not involved in because my schedule is just kind of crazy. But Dragon says it's quite fun. But anyways, just getting into my overall thoughts on The Prince of Egypt, Dragon. I remember this movie mostly from the Cartoon Network theater. This is the same programming schedule. I mentioned the Iron Giant that I remember seeing the Iron Giant a bunch of times in. As well as like stuff like Balto. Balto was definitely a part of this lineup as well.
Oh yeah, Balto, yeah.
Definitely some major nostalgia here. You know, kind of like this was the place. Also, Dragon, I'm gonna pull a deep cut on you. One of the ones I remember from this lineup, Rover Dangerfield.
Yes, I do. I do. Here's the. I remember Rover Dangerfield, but not on it airing on television. I have the VHS tape of Rover Dangerfield.
So yeah, the Cartoon Network theater lineup was quite eclectic. It was quite eclectic, but Prince of Egypt, Dragon, I remember this one being intimidating to me as a kid. I remember this one being so larger than life, so big in scope, and frankly, very, very scary from the marketing. Like, you know, having all these plagues and the river of blood and everything like that. And so, Dragon, I really only remember watching this movie once or twice as a kid. And for some reason, I've never really came back to it as an adult until now. I always knew it was great. Even as a kid, it was one of those things where it very much stuck out to me, where it was very much an overwhelming experience watching it as a kid because there's so much stuff going on with it. There's so many hardcore elements that are being thrown at you. Dragon, this hit me really hard when I was watching this movie. The Prince of Egypt is essentially the DreamWorks equivalent to Hunchback of Notre Dame.
In many respects, yeah, I never looked at it that way, but I think you're right. I think it's a good comparison.
And Dragon, I'm surprised that DreamWorks theatricals. You know, we did that debate, and I said How to Train Your Dragons would make a good musical. Pi said Peabody and Sherman. Dragon, my God, how has this not hit Broadway yet?
Well, you know, the funny thing is, I think it's been adapted to the stage a few times, but not Broadway. I think it's been more of like kind of like a low, kind of like an in-house sort of thing. Like,
Okay,
I've seen a few adaptations or stage works of it, but I think it has been done like low, like not in official capacity though.
Dragon, I don't know, man. I am kind of in love with this movie now. I really am. I will say that the How to Train Your Dragons trilogy is a close second. But on a purely artistic level, like from top to bottom, from animation to music to voice cast to set pieces to pacing to writing, holy shit, this has got to be the best DreamWorks movie by a pretty considerable margin.
Yeah, this is a great one. So for me, Prince of Egypt. So it's probably one of the finest. I echo your sentiments there. It's one of the finest. It's one of DreamWorks' finest films, hands down. Like for me, it's always in the top five, but sometimes sometimes it kind of gets bumped out by this one. It's just a question of like, if we're going objectively, it's easily in the top five, no question of it. It's up there objectively, no problem. And I do love the movie. It's just a question of sometimes it's like DreamWorks as a it's not as much as Pixar, but there are a number of films that are definitely like they're definitely kind of top 10, top five
DreamWorks,
material,
when
and
they
it's like
hit, they really hit. That's the thing.
that's the thing. Like for example, like a part of me would, plus you have to pick through like franchise if you're ever making a list without just kind of taking the easy game, like the whole trilogy or the whole the whole thing. Where it's like I would put Prince of Egypt in there, but I also have to have things like Megamind's always going to be my number one. So I have Megamind there. I got one of the How to Train Your Dragons movies. I got a Kung Fu Panda in the corner pocket. I got one of those going on. Then of course it's like the question. Well, I mean Shrek's important, but I mean it's nowhere near as good as Prince of Egypt, though. It's
Well,
like one of
Shrek,
those.
I think Shrek 2 is the go-to for a
Well, I
top.
just mean in general, like something from the, but yeah, sure, like Shrek
Yeah,
1, Shrek 2, but probably, again, if we're talking like quality, obviously Shrek 2. But you see what I'm saying, though, right? It's the fact like Prince of Egypt definitely deserves like a top five spot, but then you can like,
Dragon. I don't know, man. I mean, I think this film is ambitious. I think it's just so much more rich, and it takes so much risk. And man, it's like, you know what? As much as I like How to Train Your Dragons, Dragon, I just this film is just it really did kind of captivate me in a way. Just rewatching it as an adult, and again, I don't know why it took me this long to rewatch it. Like I said, I remember having those one or two vivid experiences watching it on Cartoon Network back in the day, and the movie really sticking with me in a very visceral kind of powerful way. But I don't know, Dragon. Honestly, I think at the core of it, the root of it, why I really am attached to it right now is it's very simple, Dragon. And this is going to sound uber nerdy, and I apologize. Um, this would just make a damn good Broadway show at the end of the day.
well, see, for me, okay, so here's the thing. So for me, of course, DreamWorks, they primarily had like four 2D films, like in the kind of the early kind of phase one stage of DreamWorks, let's call it. And you had just call it something, but the early years of DreamWorks they had four 2D movies because obviously they moved away from that a lot. Once Shrek kind of started out of the gate, so basically that's when they really started to kind of move away from 2D, unfortunately. But you basically the film it's almost like when we think back to Freakazoid and the Tick and stuff like that. It's like remember you had kind of an option where I went the Freakazoid and I discovered the Tick years later. It was like one of those things.
Mhm.
And for me, it was I went to El Dorado. Like my friends and I, we love and have memorized every line from El Dorado. We love that movie.
Yeah,
That's
I gotta admit, Dragon. I like that's the thing. It's like we mentioned the VHSs. I definitely own the El Dorado VHS. That was like a proud placement in my VHS collection.
I remember taping
Prince
it on HBO.
I never owned. Prince of Egypt was something that I just kind of like happened upon from TV once or twice, and I knew it as like the very intense movie.
And that's the thing, it's a like I remember like taping El Dorado and VHS tape back in the early days of HBO, and it was like really it wasn't as easy as it is now, where it's like, hey, what's coming on? It's an event, you could tape it or something like that. Way back when, where like you didn't have like a little HBO button on your remote, you had to wait for the channel to pop up, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so basically, I gravitated towards El Dorado when it basically was like a question of El Dorado or Prince of Egypt or Sinbad or the other one I eventually, unfortunately, I did watch, which was Stallion. Here's the thing: it was so bland, I may or may not have watched it because I just can't go back to it. I think it's bored the crap. I mean, the trailer's telegraphed. Stallion the Cimmerize. I can't stand that.
Oh dear. Oh man. Yeah. That's the
Of course, now it's got a net.
Forgets exists.
Of course, now it's got a Netflix.
Now has a Netflix show with multiple seasons.
And again, that's the first thing to me about Stallion the Cimarrons has always been the fact that, again, because it was so bland, like I can't remember if I just watched the trailer and I knew everything from the movie, or I distinctly remember sitting in the theater watching. It was that bland. It's like, hey, I can't remember sitting through it because all of it's in the trailer.
Oh god!
The only movie I for the life of me, I can remember seeing a lot of movies, Steve, but that's like the one that for the life of me, I cannot remember if I saw it or not. And I
Mandela effect.
Anyway. So back to Prince of Egypt. So Prince of Egypt said, so again, this it's one of DreamWorks' finest films. And in retrospect, this really should have been the first film they made out of the gate, because it was the first one in production, but then they wanted to compete with Pixar, so they released Ants first. So this really should have been their first one out of the gate. And I think that's unfortunate that didn't happen, because this is probably the most, for me, it's the most compelling biblical film I've ever seen. Still, to this day, it is. It's a story about brothers, a savior, and having faith, having a faith in a better quality of life. It's about some really strong, powerful things, but it's not preachy at all. And I respect the crap out of that. I really do. It's there's something special about Prince of Egypt. And I remember, here's the thing. Last year when we did, I believe it was either last year or the year before. One year we finally had gotten to, I guess, we'd done Rise of the Guardians, and then we had also done the. We done it's the Easter Beagle, Charlie Brown. I think that's what we did last year. Then it kind of dawned on me.
And Easter Beagle was like a huge nostalgic favorite of mine, of course.
Exactly, and whenever we did that, it just kind of occurred to me, like, oh man, we probably, because I was looking up like list of Easter stuff, and of course we weren't going to do Hop, but I was looking at like the list of
Great Dragon. That's when the like, honestly, I'd rather do like terrible knockoffs of Easter movies than do Hop.
And my point is, so I look up the list of Easter stuff, and of course, Prince of Egypt's on there. And of course, I'm not really looking at Easter in the religious context. I know there's a number of people who do that. No, all power to them by all means.
What?
But of course,
next year we could do Jesus Christ Superstar. No, I'm curious. There's a 1973 movie version that we could talk about. It's pretty badass.
Well, my point is, of course, when I think Easter, I'm thinking, I'm thinking the bunny, I'm thinking the chocolate, I'm thinking, I'm thinking kind of your Easter eggs and everything. I'm thinking kind of thing more kind of like how we sell the holiday versus kind of, I guess, what technically, I guess, is the origins of Easter. But again, I want to get all semantical or trying to get all theological.
Have we ever done a top 10 Pixar Easter eggs?
I know we keep talking about it. I'm not sure if we ever. I don't believe we ever
did get to that at some point.
Well, we'll definitely have to look into that. But just anyway, what was I? Oh yeah. So what I'm saying is, so that's the thing. So you're thinking about Easter in just kind of that context, but of course there's also a religious component. Basically, the correlation between the two is kind of what we get in, like you kind of said wonderfully in Rise of the Guardians. Kind of keep it all Easter themed and referential here. Is it's about as we heard from the Hugh Jackman Easter Bunny, it looks a little bit more like an Easter kangaroo, but same difference. We learned that. Easter is about kind of spring and new beginnings, and that's a really great idea. And we kind of have the correlation there with kind of the roots of Easter, which is kind of all these, kind of Exodus, the Passover, these big events do all happen around the time of Easter, and again, like these new beginnings and these big changes in status quo as far as as far as the Bible and stuff and the story of Exodus goes. Again, that's all really interesting stuff, and just kind of the correlation there. So it's it's a little interesting. So just drag a little bit Easter into this kind of theme of Prince of Egypt here, a little bit. Up.
All right. Also, just really quickly, in terms of my thesis, Dragon, just to tack something on. This movie handles the passage of time in an animated movie in a more ambitious way than I've ever seen before. I mean, man, it's like they really go all out with the character designs, like scene by scene, showing just how much the events of the film are affecting them on a physical and mental level. And it's just absolutely staggering character work.
Yes. One last thing I want to tack on to mine as well is that, again, it's to kind of justify a little bit of the Easter stuff as well, but more so I just want to talk about just something the film does, I think it really needs to get a lot of credit for, is that many a time we see these these kind of these discount versions of kind of these of the famous fairy tales, or kind of the reimaginings, or like we see Aladdin, but there's also like the Aladdin and the 40 Thieves, not 40 Thieves. Well, you have the 40 Thieves, and you have the Arabian Nights. So basically, have like all these. They basically, let's say you were to go on demand or something. You're going to like look into movies. You're going to type in Aladdin. You're going to type in just kind of an iconic property, an iconic story, or just like Jack and the Beanstalk, something. And a lot of the time, you'll get like one of those cheesy, really low budget kind of like versions of the story, but not like a movie about the story. It's just basically, hey, here's like kind of the general beats. Like now we have kind of the the more egregious, like kind of like the rip-offs, like Cars and all these other things. But before that, we did have these more they were produced by like a studio, but a lot of the times, and the reason I bring it up is a lot of times they're kind of like religious tales. A lot of times, like they're telling the story, some of the Greek myths, but beyond that, you also have just kind of the stories of the Bible. And a lot of the times, they just felt like really agrees, like it's history lesson before it's story, before it's compelling story, and before it's really relating something or really trying to kind of like grab an audience or entertain an audience. It's a history lesson without without like a real voice cast, without anything really interesting going on. I feel, again, I just want to highlight that this film, it tells you the story. It kind of makes it strips away just kind of a lot of. I'm not an uber religious guy, and of course we're going to try. Obviously, we're going to talk about kind of big things in this, and of course correlate to the story. But that's what I love about it. This thing is about. It's about a story before it's about before it's about a message. Before it's about like we have to check our boxes here. We have to we have an agenda. And this movie takes a lot of risk. It takes a lot of chance. It gets away with a lot of stuff because it's based on something really important that no one can really turn their noses up at. And that allows it to kind of get into some really bold things in animation that, again, at the time, we really hadn't seen. Like, again, there's blood in the water. That, in animation, there's always like a battle for blood, especially on the big screen. And again, we get a lot of that. We get a lot of dark stuff. There's the deaths of children, the perceived, essentially a genocide of children. There's a lot of really dark and heavy stuff that we get away with because it's biblical, because there are these big stories, these big tales. And I just love the fact that we present it through this really compelling window of just it's a story about brothers. We boil it down to its essence, and that's what the movie is about. And that's the thing, like this movie really needs to be credit for. I think that's
the core of it. There's like these larger than life, like biblical, epic, like oh my god, like sweeping, like holy shit, just world defining moments going on. But at the core of it, it's between two guys. And that's what really makes it intimate. That's what really sweeps it. It's just, yeah, you're absolutely right about that, Dragon.
I mean, just to keep it to a phrase here, it's like it's a relatable human story with biblical heights. That's what the movie is, and that's what it does so well, and that's why it's endured, and that's why we're talking about it. So speaking,
okay, can I just say the score is like holy crap, one of the best scores I've ever heard for any movie.
I have a funny story when we get to a specific scene with Hans Zimmer. We'll get there.
Okay. I mean, really Hans Zimmer, man. I mean, God, that guy can do no wrong.
And again, this is kind of Hans Zimmer in his pride. This is like Hans Zimmer, I guess, Hans Zimmer post Lion King, but still, this is like Hans Zimmer. I remember in those early, like this in El Dorado. Wait, sorry, no, I'm thinking of something else. But basically, I'm pulling from the Lion King because in El Dorado, I'm thinking of Elton John, but Hans Zimmer in regards to this one here. But just the point was like Lion King did have an impact on DreamWorks. You can definitely see Jeffrey Katzenberg kind of stealing a bit of his crew from that and putting it in the early DreamWorks movies. It's kind of funny. But anyway, so yes, let's ask the question, like, what gets us the Prince of Egypt? A little mini history lesson for the big epic that is the Prince of Egypt.
Let's do you want to do this in like an epic God Bible voice the whole time, Dragon?
Well, no, because I feel that's more Charleston Heston's bag. This is not the Val Kilmer bag. We gotta be all
fair enough.
We gotta be the purple fiery God. We can't be like the big booming scary God. Anyway. So, in no seriousness,
who made faces and lips in the first place?
Oh God! Anyway. Okay, so the film, it's really interesting because again, they have to take this with a grain of salt because there's kind of a conflicting story going on here. It's like it's not 100%. Sounds a little suspect, but the origins of this movie seem a little too coincidental. Where the word is Jeffrey Katzenberg. He wanted to do a Ten Commandments animated film. He wanted to tell the story of Exodus and the Ten Commandments in animation. He pitched that while he was at Disney to Michael Eisner. Of course, as we know, thanks to Wake, Sleep, and Beauty, they were at odds. And now Eisner shot him down. Whether that was because it's too edgy an idea or because they were having some kind of fraught tension over there at that time, it's unclear. Mm-hmm. So the point is, Jeffrey Katzenberg had this idea and it was kind of shot down. Now then, of course, he forms a year after Lion King, he goes on to forge DreamWorks, PDI DreamWorks SKG with David Geffen, Steven Spielberg, and himself. They form this. And they kind of sit down.
One of my initials is in the title of the company, guys. Isn't it nifty?
Absolutely. So the idea is, he sits down with Spielberg, and they're kind of talking about what they want to do with the company, what kind of films and such. And Spielberg says, and again, the way the story goes is that Spielberg says, "You guys should do the Ten Commandments." Now the question is, how coincidental is it that Spielberg also wanted to do a movie like that? Or what I think it is, I think the truth lies in the center there, where I think Spielberg and Katzenberg were kind of in talks after he pitched that to Eisner. I think he contacted Spielberg, and they talked it over, and then once they formed the company, he officially gave them the order. That's what I think no one's talking about. But the point is, the way Katzenberg tells the story is that they both sat down, and Spielberg, they both had the same great idea. So the point is, they both felt passionate about telling a Ten Commandments story in animation. And historically, Spielberg, I believe the last time he did really a collaboration with Disney was Roger Rabbit, I want to say. So the point is, like, Spielberg had kind of gotten a taste of what it is like to work with Disney, and having a great reverence and respect for Disney animation, kind of wanting to tell kind of a post Schindler's List important story, but again using kind of the Disney animation.
Very much kind of an animated Schindler's List, Dragon. It's like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be repetitive, but it's just got some heavy themes in here, man. It's rich like a velvety chocolate cake, my friend.
But you see what I'm saying there. It does fit. I mean, that does feel kind of like a kid's version of Schindler's List in a great way.
Absolutely, yeah.
So essentially, I always assume that's kind of either that's just Spielberg kind of waiting to tell the next big story after he's done something like this, but kind of telling something kind of for everyone. It's a very noble pursuit what he's going for there. So whether it's just completely coincidental or the point is they were in talks about doing a Ten Commandments movie, they signed that off, and that was supposed to be the first film that DreamWorks was to put out. So again, it was to be the first film until the whole ants controversy. Basically, Ants versus Bugs Life. They wanted to pressure Pixar so they could release. They wanted to release Prince of Egypt before A Bug's Life because they knew that was going to be really good, and that's what they've been working on since ¡94. Again, like since right after The Lion King comes out, they're working on. DreamWorks is getting their feet off the ground, ready to put out Prince of Egypt. So they're working on that for 4 years, and that's going to come out was supposed to come out in. 97, I want to say. I forget if it was like they were supposed to go up a year or back a year. The point is they're supposed to release that first, and then basically Pixar said no to the offer, which means they had to essentially meant they wanted there's kind of the ultimate middle finger to them by saying, okay, we're going to release our bug movie first, and we don't even need. They were offering like to just not do the movie anymore. They were that it just shows you how much of a power play it was Katzenberg had on him. It's I don't want to go on the whole tangent. The point is they offered They offered to cancel Ants so they can get a better date for Prince of Egypt. They turned them down, so they released Ants as their first film, and eventually Prince of Egypt came out second, which I feel is kind of more of a thumb to the nose of for DreamWorks, because like their first movie's Ants, which is a very obvious ripoff. It's good enough. Like there's nothing. Ants is not a bad movie. It's just it's compared to Bug's Life. It's
in some regards I prefer it to A Bug's Life in every. Like, honestly, from a story point of view, I think it's got a more original story than A Bug's Life does.
There's something special
But from a character point of view, I think Bug's Life has far more memorable characters.
There's something special about Ants, but to me, it's like nowhere near as special or kind of has that heart of a story. It basically has like an actual kind of like has something like deserving of telling a story being a movie like Bug's Life has. That's the difference to me. Ants just feels like they're having fun with it, and again, it's a fun experience, but it doesn't feel like it necessitates it being a film. I know it sounds a little strange, but I don't. Anyway, let's not go into the whole Ants Bug's Life semantics.
All right,
that's a whole conversation in itself. But
I know.
All right, so getting back on point here. So, of course, you're telling a movie about Exodus. There's a lot of stakes on the table there because you screw this up, especially as for what they're working on was supposed to be their first movie. There's a lot of pressure on that, right? So they consult essentially.
Can you imagine if Hunchback was the first Disney Renaissance movie? That's like the kind of pressure they're dealing with in that regard. Put that in context.
Oh man, that's a biggie. Of course, like Hellfire alone. I mean. But so here's the thing. So essentially, they wanted to cover all their bases, and they did the smart thing by consulting all the religious scholars, like all different sects of religion. You have a little bit of Christianity, you have Judaism. You have a bit of they went to there's Muslim. There's they contract a whole. They outsourced and got a lot of input on the religious. It's basically so everybody would be appeased. That was the idea that they want. They talked to everybody, and it did appease most, if not all the parties involved. Like all the changes, they were listened to, and they weren't like slavish to the changes, but they were taking inspiration. Some story choices were made that actually benefited the thing. And of course, they did make a few alterations to the original story that were for cinematic, very cinematic changes. Like basically, they tried to make things a little less convoluted. Like, Moses wasn't, if you want to look at the actual history, like, Moses supposedly wasn't supposed to be, he wasn't adopted by Ramesses' mother. It was like there was someone else. The point is, it wasn't like a direct familial relationship. There was convoluted things that would have been, well, there's still it's Moses dealing with the Pharaoh, but they weren't necessarily brothers. Of course, you make them brothers, it plays a lot better, right?
Mm.
So the point is, they made some smart cinematic choices there, which weren't a lot. They weren't like egregious or anything. Just like things that kind of like cut out the middleman, just kind of get point A, point B, and they did some research trips to Egypt. They had a lot of really neat stuff. Again, this is
the scale on this movie. Can you just talk to that a little bit? Like, did they shoot with IMAX cameras or what? The scale on this thing is huge.
Well, it's funny you should mention that. So with the scale, what they did is, so this is early. Again, this is the first movie they're developing the 2D, 3D blending system that they had, which that adds to the scale you're talking about. That's kind of the trick of it all right there, because they're figuring it out. And again, you can kind of see it vary between the four movies that they did, because all four movies have kind of that blend of the 2D, 3D CGI look, which at the time, you had experimented with caps, but this was like a different thing entirely. Again, it's kind of based on caps, but again, it's kind of melding the two things, but focusing on scope. So that's what you have there. So you have it in El Dorado, which it looks pretty good in El Dorado. Sinbad, they think to go a little overboard on. Stallion the Cimarron, I just don't care. And sorry, it sounds a little cruel, but I just don't care. Anyway, the point being here, it never looked as great as it did in Prince of Egypt, because you had these shots that looked like it's the illusion of live action within 2D animation, which to me I think that's like it's you're convincing the devil he doesn't exist sort of move right there. It's like, oh my god, that's a masterful trick right there, because we have these shots where basically they'll animate the water in 3D, but again they'll have like a painted set, and with that little thing it kind of adds to it's like an uncanny valley in 2D effect, where like there's something not animated about this, but not 2D animated. Like it's in the foreground it's 2D, but in the background it's 3D, making it look like it's like a matte painting in a live action film. It's really impressive.
Yeah.
So speaking of which, basically all of that stuff, that was kind of the really effects. There was a lot of focus on the effects and getting that just right. So that was a lot of so that was really tricky, getting all the effects and getting that blending technique down. So that was really tricky. They had they brought in Stefan Schwartz and Hans Zimmer on the songs and the score. We have an all-star cast, which, oh my god, one of the great casts, Tiki. One of the excellent. I mean, I know voice actors.
It really is, man. It's stacked. It's like a who's who of 90s voice acting talent.
I think the important thing to note here is that, I know in the voiceover industry there's always a war going on, because again all the big jobs are going to the big actors, where again the voice actors
yes, but I feel like in this regard the characters were so larger than life and required so much pathos that I feel like the big names were kind of necessary to fill the shoes.
Precisely. That's the thing. Like, again, most of the time you get it right, so mainly with your leads. But this is a case where, again, they went big on everybody, and it did pay off. They were almost kind of well cast in their roles, and like, of course, especially for Moses and Ramesses, because you get two really good actors. You get Val Kilmer, who, for my money, I think this film is. I haven't seen every Val Kilmer movie, but out of the ones that I have seen, I got to be honest, I think this is his finest performance ever. At least in my viewing of Val Kilmer. I think it's the best performance he's ever given, personally.
Yeah, you know what? I would totally agree with that, man. I mean, I just think he's absolutely transformative in this role. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I feel like, as I mentioned earlier with the passage of time thing, man, I like his character just goes on such a journey from beginning to end. He absolutely, and the thing is, as we mentioned, like with credits, this movie's only 90 minutes. It's literally got like 7 minutes worth of credits. So from the opening logos to the end credits, it's 90 minutes, and it's such a packed 90 minutes with how we get through all the all the arcs, and especially with Kilmer. Kilmer just kind of exemplifies that with how much his performance just changes and goes through all these different cadences as we go along.
And you got to remember the really impressive thing, especially about our two leads, especially with Kilmer, is that they're playing. He's playing a young man. He's playing like essentially a teenager. Then he's playing.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
man.
Yeah, that's the big difference there. And again,
Dragon. The way I see this film is that it's basically like a very epic version of The Fox and the Hound.
You know what? Now you mention, oh my God, that's a great comparison. Yeah, there is a little bit of Fox and the Hound in there. Yeah.
Right. There's a little bit
of
Hound in there.
I have never put. Yeah, you're right. Oh man, that's a good call.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Anyway, so of course we have we have Ray Fiennes in the role of Ramesses, and I love
man. Oh man,
that's the biggest Schindler's List. Man. That's the biggest Schindler's List connect that we have with all of this, by the way, with Ray Fiennes. He gives a tremendous performance. Oh my goodness!
And again, much like Schindler's List, he delivers a villain that is like equal parts sympathetic and creepy and scary and intimidating.
It's like Ramesses has. Here's the thing: I think I have the most fun. When I rewatch this, I have the most fun with Ramesses because, again, it's just one, Ray Fiennes is giving such a great layered performance, but it's also kind of fun. And, like, this guy's so full of himself, but, again, he's a good guy at his heart. But, again, this character is a tragedy. And, again, it's a beautiful tragedy that unfolds in the movie between the two brothers, but especially on Ramesses, because we see that Ramesses is not all bad, but Ramesses, he goes through a really transformative. We'll dive into that momentarily. We'll start that off. But, we have just to list off for you. We have Patrick Stewart and as Seti the father. We have Patrick Stewart. We got Helen Mirren as the parents.
I mean, that's ridiculous right there. That it's like those two just like, hey there, we're British Hollywood royalty, just here to check in.
Yep, and we have let's see. So we have Sandra Bullock and Jeff Goldblum as Moses' siblings.
Goldblum, yes, we got some Goldblum. You know what, Goldblum, he sticks out a little bit, but I don't care. He still adds a nice flavor to the movie.
Yep, and Michelle Pfeiffer in kind of a humble role. And of course, like you have a little bit of Danny Glover. Danny Glover as her father. Anyways, the point is we got of course Martin Short and Steve Martin. Basically, just kind of listening at all the big cast members there. So we have an all-star cast. This, I believe, was Brenda Chapman's first female co-directing job, which I could be wrong here. I believe I looked this up, if I'm remembering correctly. Is that Brenda Chapman, whether this was her first job, and I think it's her first co-directing job, possibly the first female co-director in animation, possibly. I think that's I think this film was like the first female co-directing job for her in the industry. So I think that's a big thing for her. Of course, Brenda Chapman, should go on to. Guys, she's done a lot of things for Disney. I know she went up to, she co-directed Brave. She's supposed to do Brave. I'm just trying to think of some of the other stuff she'd done with Disney, but I know, so I'm blanking on it at the moment right now. But the point is, Brenda Chapman's definitely a name, big name from the Disney years. Like I think she worked on, I think she co-directed Mulan. I think she, again, I'm just going to embarrass myself. I just kind of try to think of them right now. Anyway, oddly enough, okay, one last tidbit here. Okay, so oddly enough. This film, again, it went over tremendously well with critics and everything. So the movie did go over well. However, oddly enough, the film was banned in a few countries because, again, I guess some people just can't, again, religion and politics.
I mean, you know what, Dragon? This is one of those cases where it's like, honest to God, I feel like this movie goes a couple steps beyond Hunchback, and I know I keep saying that, but I'm surprised there was no real controversy here in the States about this movie.
Well, the funny thing is that, again, they got banned in Egypt.
Oh, man.
And I kind of get why. I mean, but again, it's like, you kind of get it, but by the same token, I mean, well, that's how the story goes, I don't know to tell you. I mean, they're not making stuff up. Anyway, point being, the point being, you got banned in Egypt, which is just very ironic, given everyone else is loving it. Egypt, not so much. All right, so that's pretty much it. That's it. It's kind of the main. There's a lot of storyboarding in the mix too. It's just that also helped the process too. They had a lot of really great story. Basically, this is one of the early films that used the Avid editing system, which basically the main thing you get from Avid is something that's really commonplace in animation now. It was kind of burgeoning when it came out. was they were kind of going to animatic sequences and animation. That was kind of a big thing. Again, Tiki, you bring up Iron Giant, which is also another first for that sort of thing. I want to say Iron Giant.
Of course.
Iron Giant developed something I still think is a little bit more original than the Avid, but the point is, it's essentially the same thing, but Iron Giant did it first, if I'm remembering correctly. So the idea is like the Iron Giant and this movie were kind of the first to do the kind of the moving storyboards, as it were, the animatic storyboards. All right.
Okay, so let's see. So now, are we going to get into the 3 acts then?
Yeah, folks, that's how we're going to break this in, just in case anyone's curious. We're going to basically go through the 3 acts here, but we're going to focus on kind of our brotherly dynamic.
We're going to go based on the root image, kind of like the in this corner.
Sure. Basically go through kind of like how the big moments of the movie affect Moses and Ramesses, and kind of tracking their kind of doing this like Daredevil season 1, as it were, kind of the Matt Murdock Wilson Fisk parallel, just kind of with brothers here. So that's kind of weird.
Because there's a lot of them for sure.
There is.
All right, so Dragon, can we just talk about how awesome that opening song is? I mean, look, here's the deal, Dragon. I know you're not a musical guy, but you've got to appreciate a freaking epic, sweeping opening number like this, man.
Well, come on! I love the first 8 minutes. The first 8 minutes of this movie is amazing. We get Deliver Us, we get the lullaby.
It's so awesome. It's honestly, it's just like kind of like it's so cocksure of itself. It's just coming out like, hey, you want to see a movie? We got a movie.
So, Deliver Us, right out the gate, we have, spectacle and gravitas, and you have an instant respect for the movie. So again, they know exactly, basically that Deliver Us is what instantly gets everybody on their side for the movie. It's like, okay, you're sold.
Honestly, dare I say it might be DreamWorks Circle of Life equivalent.
Yeah, I'd
go one segment, they just set up such a good mission statement about the movie and the tone of the movie, what to expect from the scale of the movie. Like everything is set up in those moments.
It's kind of a marriage of Circle of Life meets The Bells of Notre Dame.
Yeah, I could see that. That's a good call.
You have like the history of Quasimodo with the lullaby,
right.
In some regard. So it's kind of like Deliver Us followed by. Now I love the lullaby. Here's the thing: Deliver Us is great. I have no Deliver Us. No, I will never disagree with anyone there. Deliver Us is something truly. It's based, and what's really great with Deliver Us too visually is to kind of correlate with our guys here. So Deliver Us, again, it has it's operatic and biblical, and kind of how it's presenting things kind of earns that tone. It strikes that tone for the movie right out the gate, and also it correlates to the Promised Land. We show the Promised Land outside the gates and do kind of this three-dimensional tour in 2D of kind of seeing the environments, and we kind of explore the slaves being oppressed. And again, something that visually connects to both brothers, the Promised Land and the construction with the construction of the Pharaoh statue and the Sphinx and on the tomb and everything, all that stuff. All this construction. So the construction on Ramesses' side of things, and the slaves being oppressed as well as the Promised Land with Moses. And speaking of Moses, the lullaby is what really gets me. I love just this hypnotic melody. It's so melodically hypnotic, this lullaby sequence. It's a great theme. It's this beautiful song sang from Moses' mother. It's and you gotta remember this is something again, it's not really big. I mean, I'm pretty sure you know this story, but I mean in the ages of Michael Uslan, basically the godfather of Batman, one of the godfathers of kind of comics being taken seriously in the films. Like we don't get Batman 89 without Michael Uslan, and I had the pleasure of meeting the guy. Of course, he famously tells the story of like how he was able to teach a college course about superheroes, about comics and superheroes in a college. Basically, he had to sell the dean on the idea, and basically the dean was like, so "Look, I respect what you're trying to do. I read Superman as a kid, but look, I can't. I don't want funny books taught at my college. I can't let that happen." And basically, Michael Uslan asked him to recap the origin of Moses, which basically he does. Which of course, the Hebrews are being slaughtered. The Hebrew children are being slaughtered. And mother places the kid in a basket, which kind of gets sent down the river. So he becomes a great hero to his people. And of course, he then says, "Now you said you read Superman comics as a kid, right? Now tell me the origin of Superman." And he tells him, "Well, again, planet was about to be destroyed. Sends the kid in the spaceship, and he becomes a great hero." And he stopped mid sentence. "Okay, you're credit. You get it. Okay, I'll give you the class. You got it." Yeah. Anyway, so anyway, well, the point being, it's kind of always have kind of a Superman correlation with Moses. Again, one of the course Superman having it's kind of a neat little thing there. So there's always a little bit of that with the origin of Moses. So it's a big thing. It's a big deal. Is my point. So we see this lullaby signifies Moses' destiny again. What it correlates to, he'll deliver us in that it's going to deliver my son.
It's like this empire kind of like falling apart and like. Like this is like the baby's like last chance. Like I can't take care of you, but maybe fate will send you on a different course. It's just like kind of like hopefulness against all odds in that sort of respect.
Like this is a beautiful harrowing sequence right now because again, like children are being slaughtered in this scene, and Moses.
By the way, Dragon, can I just talk about the violence and like holy crap? There's just a lot of imagery here that I'm surprised they got away with.
And again, Tiki, it's like the little loophole. They can get away with it because Bible. It's the ultimate, the two ultimate loopholes, Tiki. You got religion and you got robots. You can do whatever you want to them. It's what are you gonna do? What are you gonna complain to?
Right.
but yeah, so Moses, he's sent down the river, and again they kind of signal the whole correlation of deliver him to safety, deliver us, of course, the ultimate correlation there with how Moses eventually delivers everybody in the end. I love how Miriam bears witness. His sister kind of goes along the path and see. And again, it's a story-driven reason that she has to see for the plot point later on. She has to know that Moses is who he is. So she watches this unfold, and of course she's singing the lullaby, and we see him almost kind of get eaten by crocodiles and everything. It's a really harrowing sequence. Like, again, this kid is delivered by fate or by a higher power, one could say, which of course ultimately pays off to kind of the Moses connection of it all in the story.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, so let's see. So the next sequence after Deliver Us, unless you have anything else about that.
One last thing, just again, in correlating the brothers here. I love how basically the idea of like an ordinary Hebrew is labeled kind of blessed by the Egyptians. Like that's what makes him special. He's just labeled special because he was brought to them. And it's the idea that, again, like ordinarily, again, all these children are being slaughtered because they're Hebrew. Because they're Hebrew slaves, and it's unfair. And again, just because this one kid is special and he's labeled, he is spared. And again, it shows. I don't know. It's again, it's all due to kind of a mercy after just this great preventable tragedy. I think it's all really kind of nice and relative. And of course, the two brothers kind of meet each other in the scene where Moses is the baby, and of course we see Ramesses a little jealous of Moses here, just a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
All right.
So yeah, let's move.
Go ahead.
Oh, go on. Let's move on to the next thing. Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. So the next thing would be the chariot race. Oh man, Dragon, talk about again, this movie just has such a great pace to it because it's like the first thing we get is this awesome like sweeping Broadway style song, and then we literally just like pop we just need like someone firing a gun at the start of the race. Like that's because that's literally what we get. It's like, okay, and here's a very exciting chase sequence that's also going to lead to long-term consequences for the rest of the movie for our characters.
Yeah, it's again, it's a very humanized. Again, it's a really great story thing where we humanize the brothers. We illustrate kind of the history between these two. Where Moses is he's the brother without the responsibility. He's playing Ramesses because again, he's the adopted brother. Therefore, he's not going to be the he's not in line for the throne. He's not the oldest. I mean, as far as Moses knows, he's just not the oldest brother. Doesn't quite know about the adoption full on. But the point being, he it's the fact that he's never going to have to bear the burden, so he can kind of take some shots at his brother, just going to give him to live a little. And because of this, Ramesses on a regular basis gets in trouble. And of course, we get the famous nose job from this scene, which is kind of funny. Again, I had a little bit of comedy in this really serious kind of big movie. We get some comedy there, but they're fooling around. Again, does kind of wreck things. And of course, we lose the nose, paint a smile on the
right.
That's still funny. I don't know why. Anyway, point being, in this sequence, we establish the dynamic perfectly. It's a little bit of an action sequence in a not so action heavy movie until like the third act. So we're doing some great story stuff here. So then, of course, we meet the boy's father. So this is a really great scene. We meet Seti. Seti, of course, played by the wonderful Patrick Stewart. He brings a great love and sternness to the role.
He just has such an awesome gravitas to him, and The thing that's awesome about this character is that he could very easily just be played as a one-dimensional bad guy within the context of the story they're trying to tell. You know what I mean?
But he's not, and that's what's so beautiful. That leads to my favorite moment in the entire film. But it's
Mhm.
you know it's the fact that we're basically kind of in Moses' head that this is going to be a complicated situation because you do love your father, and again he is basically I heard the way this scene was described by like Katzenberg gave him like a note on this scene saying like he's more mad. It's like kids getting like crashed in a car. He's more worried about their safety, but it's more like he's angry at them because they could have gotten hurt before. So you destroyed all sorts of stuff, and you two being reckless,
Right, right.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
so we put forward the idea. This is going to be really important for Ramesses' arc here, where he's concerned over Ramesses being the weak link in the chain. He puts that forward there, and that's kind of those are the words that are going to be carved on the back of Ramesses' head throughout the whole film, where it's like, oh god, he does not want to. This is a really traumatic moment for Ramesses. He's getting blamed yet again. Again, it was most of the shenanigans, but he took part in it, so he's not like blaming his brother. But it's like this always,
Like,
all the pressure.
him and his brother are cool. You know what I mean? It's kind of like
Yeah,
one of those moments with best friend, like, hey, what the hell, dude? I took the fall for you, bro. And the best friend is just like, yeah, I know you did, man. I'll hit you back next time, bro. It's no big deal. It's like at this point, they're like totally just like, you know what I mean? Just kind of simpatico. And Ramsey's like, I feel like Ramesses, like, he's not really bothered by it at this point, but he is kind of like observing that it's happening and kind of taking note of it.
exactly, because that's the thing is Ramesses has a lot of pressure thrust upon his shoulder, and maybe unfairly so. But again, it is an important job, and importantly, the thing with the Egyptian society that they kind of put forward in the movie is that, of course, it's always about legacy. Legacy is the operative word in the Egyptian culture, especially with the pharaohs. It's all about the fascinating thing about the pharaohs and what we see visually in this movie is that in this scene we have that beautiful shot where we encapsulate what these characters are all about right now because they're in this throne room, this really excellent throne room because there are no windows back then, folks. So basically, it's like it's behind a wall, but behind that wall is nothing because again, it gives you a great view, which is basically you can see the Sphinx and the statues and everything, and the statues show the previous year. Like your whole legacy is about them building upon your death. That's the fascinating thing about the Egyptian culture. Like they're building a statue to you because when you're going to die, you'll be sealed in that tomb. Traditionally, that's the way it goes, and they're kind of commemorating the pharaoh for his demise. So again, right now we have an inkling that okay, Seti's not going to be around for the rest of this movie, and then Ramesses, once he becomes pharaoh, we'll be building upon that with a bigger statue beyond that one. So again, statue upon statue upon statue. It's all about building things, but building upon the same status quo and just kind of building it bigger and better. As far as Ramesses, the point is where we see a lot of life course theory in play here, where pretty much psychological on things here. But the fact of the matter is, we get a little bit of life course here, where all this pressure is put on Ramesses, and we see that visually later on, where we have bigger statues and grander plans for Egypt, because again, he wants to honor his father, and he's driving that all the ways he feels he disappointed his father. He's expressing that visually and kind of physically with the expansion plans for Egypt when he becomes kind of the chief architect and vice versa, like kind of the overseer of the chief architect. So we're seeing all this put into play, and I love how on the flip side of things, Moses, he can be more open with Seti because Seti knows the fact that Moses is not of his bloodline, but also it's the fact he's the younger brother who doesn't have all the responsibility. And there's kind of like an open conversation where we see the hook of why Ramesses is not angry at Moses. It's the fact that he knows that Moses is the guy who's always going to have his back with this stuff. He's always going to be the guy to get him out of Dodge. He kind of put in a good word with father, which gets him the architect job. So that's nice, right? Right. Anyway, so let's see. So we also see this through these personal kind of statue chats with Ramesses and Moses, where it goes really full circle where they're in the throne room and they have they have these chats from the throne. They're not the throne, but like kind of the room I guess below the throne, where they're kind of like he's literally having a chat within the statue of his father's laps and some neat stuff there. It's Sorry, folks. I'm trying to get my bearings here a little bit. Just 1 second. I guess something important in this scene I wanted to note is that we see them kind of chat. They're being chastised for tearing legacy down, which kind of eventually is what's going to be form the rift between the two brothers. I think that's really interesting. We kind of hit all of our story beats in Act One with this. It's definitely a payoff, within kind of the end of Act Two and going into Act Three here. So it's kind of again the Egyptians' fatal flaw of like we're always building legacy, and that's anyway. So I guess we have this moment between Moses and Ramesses where they're kind of joking between brothers. Just you blame me for bringing the whole kingdom down. You're going to bring the kingdom to ruin, brother. Oh yeah, just of course Moses kind of joking about this offhandedly. Again, it's going to be a sad irony to what happens between these two. So let's see. So let's see. Sibling, the sibling dynamic adds like a great amount of sympathy and accord to why to why Moses's actions, correlate with Ramesses. It's the brother causing trouble, and Ramesses suffering. So again, there's a lot of kind of love versus responsibility going on here. Anyway, that point is like we'll cover a little bit more of that later. Let's move on to the big scene here. Big scene from Moses. The big grand revelation. So the big revelation, I guess, would be we have we're at we have the party scene where we see Moses is responsible. We're at the party that Moses is responsible for, and the fact that like Ramesses has gotten the promotion, he's being they're throwing a little party for him, and I like that this thing that Moses has kind of put forward is it's like he's he becomes architect to Ramesses, and he also meets his future wife Zipporah, and he kind of follows her, which kind of leads him to Miriam and Aaron. So meets he re-meets Miriam and Aaron, and of course we have the big lullaby moment where she basically she tries to reach him and kind of reminds him that you're my brother from way back, and sings the lullaby, which kind of is like an earworm in Moses's mind, which leads to the nightmare sequence. The nightmare sequence is very striking moment, very very visually dynamic sequence where we see kind of like a nightmare in hieroglyphics, right? Right? So, all right. Let's see. We have the nightmare sequence, and this is a little funny story here. We have, there was a guy who's working on the movie when they did this sequence. He just complained that, for years I studied hieroglyphics and I never had a use for it. And of course, he finally did this movie, and he finally had an excuse to like this really artful sequence where basically we see Moses' memories coming back in the form of hieroglyphics, and he's so haunted by this. He goes to like the wall where he's seen these events play out, where all this has been kind of formulated in there, and we have this really we have the haunting payoff to all this. We have 1 second, folks. Right. So we have the haunting payoff to this, where we have probably my favorite scene in the movie with Seti. So with Seti, we see him. Sorry, folks, a little bit of technical difficulty here. Just trying to work. Forgive my minor stumbling here. But anyway, so seriously, I want to give it its due here. So we have my favorite moment in the film with Seti here. So Moses goes to kind of this wall of hieroglyphics, which basically tells the slaughtering of the Hebrew children, that basically is the origin of Moses, and it's a really great striking visual. And Seti shows up and basically comforts his son, and essentially Moses kind of being confronted with the fact that he's adopted, as well as the fact of what his father has actually done. It's something that he's always turned a blind eye to. He's just always like this. Again, this is before his time, but just kind of forgetting like kind of an unflattering chapter in the Egyptian history, as it were. And his father comforts him, and this is the beautiful thing. This is my favorite part here, where Patrick Stewart has such a great sympathetic, a great fatherly tone to his voice here, where he's just comforting Moses, but gives him this hug, and again, like Moses is really in crisis, and like, oh my son, and then basically as he holds him close, he says the line, this most, oh God, so great. He says, oh my son, they were only slaves. They were only slaves, and we have this moment where it's like Moses is he's truly taken aback by he's like, oh my God, he's in disbelief. He's backing up, and he's off. So he's kind of horrified by his father. Again, his father is this man who's just been kind of the loving kind of idol for him of like something to become, again, something to admire. Is like this guy who's kind of a guy behind a certain genocide of, again, he ordered the deaths of these children. Just his excuses, they were only slaves. It's like this very demystifying your hero moment. Just probably the most striking, impactful moment of the entire film. And again, it's like we don't see like gratuitous violence, but again, it's implied. And again, it's the horror of it all. Really, it's a powerful moment for sure. Anyway, so let's see. So beyond that, so after that, so now, okay, so then we have the day after. So Moses is enlightened and now conflicted as he tries to return to the original status quo, where Ramses is just all jovial and he's jovial and plotting like the glorious, and he's immersed in bountiful, glorious purpose of forming Egypt essentially in his own image, just making Egypt bigger and brighter and everything. He's making it bigger, which again, the irony is like, again, what Ramesses is doing essentially in this movie, he wants to build a bigger Egypt, which means like, work the slaves twice as hard, which is just really horrible if you think of that. But again, he's just so happy-go-lucky about it. And this is where we get a little bit of that's where the Goth from Schindler's List comes into play with him. He's like, again, this guy doesn't really quite realize how monstrous he is, but again, he's kind of jovial and really thinks highly of himself. And that's kind of what we have. But again, it's a much nicer version of Goth here. It's kind of what you get with Ray finds. Anyway. So Moses, he's very.
I'm sorry, I've been sitting here like he's ignoring me. Like he's just sitting here. I'm trying to make these points, and he's just like, I didn't realize my mic was muted, Dragon. I'm so sorry. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, I don't know how it happened either. Okay.
Yeah, well, you should have. Did you try saying something? I was like, I was like, it just seemed to me like you were like, just kind of like, anyways, I'm back now. I don't know. I was trying to get your attention the whole time, and then I realized, wait a minute. Anyways, go ahead.
Why don't you start?
Well, I'm sorry. I was like more fixated on like, okay, Dragon, you have to like stop this. So where are we? Just
Right, we're at Moses. Okay, we're after Moses. After my favorite moment with Seta, Moses is it's the day after Moses now is informed. He's enlightened about all how complicit he's been in in kind of the horrifying status quo. He's trying to return to the status quo of
right. It's like just very intense character development from Moses just right off the bat. It's like we get kind of like the lighthearted like. Almost like I call it kind of like the pod race chase of the movie with the chariots, but then right after that we're just like, oh, ha 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 ha, it's oh wait, never mind, it's not all fun and games. It's shoot, with all this stuff we destroyed, a bunch of people's lives are gonna get a whole lot more crappy, and it's kind of my fault. And oh boy, look at this lineage that I am now a part of. This is just not good. It's just a whole bunch of character revelations just all at once, and they're handled in such an intense but eloquent way in the way they go down in the movie.
Yeah, and of course it builds to this great moment. I love just the tension on Moses' face, and so well animated because now he's enlightened. He knows what we're doing is bad here, and we see like again as Ramses is all jovial, but oh Moses, come join us as you're gonna build a better Egypt. It's gonna be grander, big plans. And as he's just so happy-go-lucky, it's like Moses is just so guilt-ridden, and as he's like seeing him, we're focusing on, we're seeing these slaves with really sad eyes looking at him, and we're seeing like.
Okay, dare I say it? It's almost kind of like how the first 30 or so minutes of Schindler's List almost lures you into a false sense of security.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. We're again, we have a bit where like a man's being whipped, and we just see like the twitch in Moses' eye, where it's like, I can't take this anymore, man. Like he's itching, he's crawling out of his own skin over what's going on here. And I love this is what Val Kilmer does so well. Like he goes from like the quiet, like stop, and he runs up there until he just again like he's like an out of body experience for him. He runs up and he basically pushes the guard off of the guy, and
so our hero, ladies, I just want to emphasize how awesome this is, Dragon. I'm not condemning this in any way. I want you to know that. our hero straight up murders somebody.
Yeah, and well, again, it's like, and I love how yet we still sympathize with him because it was an action. He was saving the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're honest. Yeah,
Like it's well played enough to where it's like you think that the act itself is justifiable, but by the same point, there's some wiggle room with the morality of like, yeah, it technically was kind of a slip.
yeah, and it's just really well staged. Like all of this is like in view. Like all the people, like Ramesses is just like he's just kind of piecing together what's going on here, and we have this big moment where like Moses leaves, and it's just it's the big goodbye scene between the brothers here, where like Ramesses loves his brother, and he's off like he's just trying to piece together what's going on here. I love how in the moment all of this is like he's just trying to catch up to Moses. Like what's going on?
Moses, please.
But it's really
one word, Dragon, just the please. Holy crap!
It's the magic word for a reason, folks. It can be really used, but in all seriousness, I love that Ramesses here, like in the way he operates, is like, look, Moses, it's fine. He just wants to cover up, like push it under the rug. He wants to use his power, like we're going to use power to cover this up. We'll cover up the crime. We'll make it right. He's very it's a very instinctual kind of older brother protecting the little brother thing, as the way Moses has protected him all these years. And it's I just love how right after the event it is, and we have like the big line that comes back throughout here where it says, brother, I am Egypt. I am the morning and the evening star. I say day is night, and it will be, and it will be so. It's just this heart.
That's the thing about Ramesses, and I'm just kind of like in love with, is that he does kind of have this. Honestly, I don't even want to call it an ego dragon. It's more deep than that. It's more kind of just like he's just so embedded into the mythology of his people that he's almost like into it to a fault. You know what I mean? He's almost like too grandiose about the whole idea of like what his kingsmanship means.
Yeah, and again, I think what really motivates that please at the end of all this too is that Ramesses is losing a piece of himself and the status quo with Moses, and this cements the path of basically these two men. And this at the end of Act 1 here, which is kind of where we're at right now, is that I love these two men are at a crossroads where they're both of them are becoming their fathers to an extent here. Where Ramesses is obviously on a path of becoming his father, where Moses rejects his adoptive father, and he adopts kind of the all-father ultimately, kind of adopts kind of the burning bush father, as it were. He adopts, the big man.
Right.
So again, he's kind of rejecting the one father in kind of a path that's going to find the other one. So it's a really just the vulnerability and the love in this scene between the two brothers, where Moses is apologetic, but he is.
And again, I just want to emphasize like the pacing in this movie is just. It's so on point. It is just like we are getting like these mind-blowing character revelations. A character's whole world is just being like rocked to the core. We're getting like these earth-shattering dramatic moments of tension between the two brothers. We're getting exciting action set pieces and awesome songs. And it's only the first act, Dragon.
Yeah, and I love how we foreshadow a lot of basically foreshadowed the ending in Act 1 here, where he runs off and calls Moses.
Oh yeah.
Big foreshadow. Again, it's so amazing. Like these two guys did not record together at all during this movie, and they had to re-record them. They had to re-record them individually just to get these scenes just right, just get the tone and the emotion, the vulnerability just right. It's good stuff.
Nice.
Act 2 goes by really fast. So Act 2 is essentially
but Act 2 there's some dark shit in Act 2.
True. Act 2 ends really big. So Act 2 is just essentially Moses is I love that visually Moses is kind of stripped of his princehood at the start of things here. And I love this is my favorite detail in a rewatch, Tiki. I love that he keeps the ring. So here's the thing, he strips everything, like he strips off the Egyptian wig, the metal and everything. Except the ring. He takes it off, but he puts it back because his brother gave him that ring. His brother made him the architect. And again, I love that. I love the symbol of this on a rewatch. I love that the ring is is the symbol of the architect, and Ramesses is an architect in the literal sense, where Moses is an architect in that. So let me rephrase it. Ramesses is an architect in the literal sense, and he is inspired by the gods. The Egyptian gods, because he says I had a vision from the gods, and of course Moses on the flip side of that he is an architect of faith and freedom, and talks with one God. So again, it's kind of a nice little dichotomy with the brothers there in terms of kind of how they are architects of their own fate to different degrees.
And also Ramses, again, as we already kind of said, Ramesses is kind of the person who he's like actively wanting the glory of the gods to befall him. And Moses, if anything, he's just like, oh God, I'm not ready for this. Like, this is why me? Holy shit, this is a lot of responsibility here.
I think you brings up an interesting point. You bring up an interesting point in that that Moses kind of people instantly love Moses. There's something really appealing about Moses, where Ramesses
Okay,
is always.
Dragon, I'm going to ask you one thing. How familiar are you with Jesus Christ Superstar?
I'm really not that familiar with it, Tiki.
Okay, all I'm going to say about Jesus Christ Superstar Dragon, because I'm sorry I keep bringing it up. I'm going to go see it next week, and I'm very excited. But really, the hook of Jesus Christ Superstar is that Judas is just as much the protagonist in that story as Jesus is. And the whole show is revolving around how Judas kind of felt like there was no other way than to do what he had to do. And you really get to feel the emotion of that. And I feel like this show or this movie very much kind of has that same kind of like weight to it that Superstar does with the Ramesses character. It's very similar to how Superstar treats Judas.
Right, and what I'm saying is I love that Ramesses is a character who he's always trying to seek approval and seek love, where Moses kind of gets it by people, and he kind of, he's taken to by the gods, where he's always like beckoning to the gods and to his father in the case of Ramesses. So it's kind of some interesting observation there, I felt. All right, so we have this is going to summarize a little bit here. We have kind of the big old montage sequence where this is where here's the thing. We have the montage where we have
basically the Hakuna Matata of the film, but it's played off so much better, and the song's so much more catchy without being as much of an annoying earworm.
Let me put it to you this way, Tiki. I think the movie. Here's the thing. I'm not personally. This is my least favorite song in the movie, but I want to emphasize this. But
it's still good.
I think it's not a bad song by any stretch. It's just I think comparatively.
Yeah, I mean, I will agree. It's like by all intents and purposes, it probably is the least memorable, least standout song. But I still think it's good. I think that especially the chorus to the dance, the folk singing and everything like that. And again, Dragon, I'm sorry, but I can't help it in my I'm kind of trained to see these sequences as like how would they be adapted on stage, and I just think this dance number would be adapted on stage super well. So I think that kind of makes me give this maybe a little bit more of a pass than you might.
Well, what I'm saying is that regardless of how I feel about the song, I love what they do with the montage and the passage of time here. That's the thing I want to highlight.
Oh yeah.
Whether I'm crazy about the song or not, because I think it's the only time in the whole movie where things feel like, again, it's first story point. So I respect what it's doing. I just don't think compared to all the rest of the songs and sequences, I don't think it's as perfect as the rest of those. Where through Evan's eyes, basically this introduces
like how A Guy Like You is the weakest song in Hunchback, but it's still kind of like a fun song in its own regard.
I love A Guy Like You in Hunchback.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying? You kind of share my sentiment. It's like, it's not great. I think in terms of pacing, it kind of slows Hunchback to a crawl, and that's kind of the main problem with it. But on an individual level, it's a fun song to listen to.
Sure, and anyway, so that's what I'm saying. So overall, what we do here, and again, the idea with Heaven's Eyes that we introduce the idea of God here, and we have to basically economize a lot of story points within this montage. So one, Moses and Zipporah, they hit it off because, of course, she's kind of the conduit for kind of Moses' destiny. Because again, she's following Zipporah, which kind of leads him to Miriam and Aaron, which of course informs him about his his origin and everything. So the point of Zipporah is kind of the connecting rod here. So he meets her, and very economically and believably, we see them kind of bond, and then we see what I really like from it is that she sees Moses' genuine humbleness and his remorse in his arc, where he's saying, "I don't deserve thanks." Here, after he's done some good things, he basically wins over his father-in-law Jethro here. And I feel that with Jethro, we have he kind of sees a mentor in Jethro. It's something I call in a rewatch, is that Jethro. Basically, Moses' dress is exactly like Jethro, and I think it's for visual story point where we have Moses go from the prince to kind of the shepherd. So again, of course, ultimately Moses is a shepherd of a character. So he's leading. If you want to look in the biblical sense of things, it's like kind of won't you be my neighbor of it all? He becomes he's leading the lambs. He's leading the lambs being the good people. The people are smiled upon by God, all that sort of stuff. So the point is like he's the shepherd of the good people. That's the idea. It's all like is Fred Rogers a lamb? That whole thing. Anyway, a sheep or whatever. Point being, so what I'm saying is I like that he's seen through Jethro, he's becoming a shepherd, which then leads to the ultimate kind of the new father he's taken to. Which
Jethro, can we just talk about like really quick? I know he doesn't have much of an impact on the plot or anything, but he's just such a warm and loving guy, and I just think he has such an infectious personality. This is gonna sound like a weird pull, but he kind of reminds me of the Ghost of Christmas Present from Muppet Christmas Carol.
I kind of see it.
Just in the way that he kind of just fills up a room and he's just kind of like infectiously happy.
Right. All right, so the point is we kind of usher him through, Moses gets married, he's in the shepherd phase, and while he's in the shepherd phase, he runs across a little burning bush.
Oh, yeah.
But it's an important burning bush, because it's the burning bush.
This is where the movie really just kind of goes like, all right, folks, we're not kidding around with the biblical stuff, man. We're just gonna go head on into it. We're not gonna play around with it. It's this is a biblical motion picture we are making.
So this is the Hans Zimmer story I wanted to tell you. So so we have the voice of God, which in itself took some doing, because of course you don't want to, because you have to follow Charlton Heston with this scene. So of course they wanted to do the big booming scary God voice. What they did is Val Kilmer is kind of the dominant voice, but it's kind of a loving, kind of soft spoken God. But the clever thing is that it's not just his voice, because the idea is like anybody in their own heads talking to God, they're going to hear their own voice. So you have that, but beyond that, they use clips and everything from everybody else in the movie, like all like Ramesses is there, like all the other players, like they're also the voice of God. So that's kind of the idea there. So the one, they have like a clever way of working, like how we're gonna do God in a way we haven't seen before, and also we kind of make the fire purple and a little bit more warm and inviting than scary and like oh God, I'm so terrified right now. But the Hans Zimmer of it all right here, the score that plays over this scene.
Oh, yeah.
So Hans, basically, he was tasked with this scene, and Hans Zimmer, of course, he knows how big an important scene this is in the history of cinema and history. So like, no pressure, Hansi, no pressure.
Yeah, it's only like the first depiction of God in a mainstream animated movie. It's just, no big deal.
In essence, Hans Zimmer kind of locked himself away, and he basically said he came out of the room or something. He presented the score. The director said, "Okay, guys, look, if this doesn't work, then you got to get somebody else for this movie, because this is all I got." Literally, he went and said, "Guys, this is all I've got. If this doesn't work, you need to find somebody else for the movie." And of course, they loved it.
Oh yeah, and not only does it work, Dragon, but as I already said, I strongly believe that. I'm pretty sure that the God theme in particular is the theme that I was sort of talking about and echoing at the start of this, where it's like the music in this movie is just so powerful and so impeccable, and just does such a great job of just kind of like luring you into this world and just like making you feel the scope of it.
Right. So then we get to the big return. So basically, he's tasked with God to do my wonders. Basically free the slaves, do my wonders, take them to the promised land. So it's kind of the checklist.
And again, Dragon, as we're talking about it, the more I'm realizing that there is a lot of Lion King in here as well. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, and I'm not saying that in terms like they were intentional about it, of course, but just thematically in terms of story structure. Think about it. We have that whole idea of like the disgraced king who's banished from his homeland and then has to return to right the wrongs of his past.
Yeah, and there is kind of a death by fall too. So it's
and of course, like I said, the happy-go-lucky song of the movie being kind of the Hakuna Matata style montage showing the passage of time.
Right. Yeah, there's some parallels. All right, so the big return here. So Moses returns. Of course, now they're both men, and we haven't seen Ramesses for the majority.
And again, I'm sorry, but just to kind of track like my little I feel like I have like a Mr. Robot like flowchart of Disney references here, Dragon. We have the fox in the hand, the fox in the helm moment right here.
Oh yeah, so this is great. So I love this is where Ray finds just I mean it just tickles me. Ray finds. So we have this he returns and he gets like now Ramesses has become pharaoh because in the years that have passed Seti has passed like pharaohs tend to do. So now Ramesses is the head honcho, and he kind of stops the festivities and he just welcomes. He gives a really warm welcome to his brother, like hugs him and everything, and it's like it's and, like the two of them are men now. They're not boys anymore. They're men. It's a new status quo we walk into, and like Ramesses, he's a pharaoh with a son. Very important. He's got a son going on here, the next generation, all that stuff, legacy, and I love that his first act, like upon Moses' return, is to pardon his brother, like without question. Like this first thing he does, again, so selfless. I mean, I'm loving Ramesses again. Like he wants to, like he says, like as Hotep and Hoy
I mean,
and
Ramus is
Hotep.
just like the type of villain where it's like it's hard to even call him a straight up villain, but at the same point, he's definitely a threatening and antagonizing force throughout the story. So it's just like he's just like juicy, man. He's just like a thick like prime rib cut of steak in terms of just layers of awesome character development.
Layers and layers of story steak or
That's
steaks.
what I'm saying, man.
Story steaks. Get them while they last.
Oh
Okay,
God.
but anyway, get them by the Salisbury. Anyway, so no, in all seriousness, though, this is great. Though I love again the first act is kind of like he's just thinking back to that moment where his brother left him. He wants to make things cool, like Hoy and
Oh,
Hotep bring up like, well, he did kill somebody, and the punishment is kind of death. So, he's okay. Screw that noise, guys. He has I pardon him from this from this crime. He's over the moon to see his brother. And I love that Moses again. He's coming not to see his brother. He exiled himself here, and he did. And the fact like he's trying to stop his brother from making like a big deal about it. And I just love like the humbleness of Moses here, and it's the idea like your heart goes out to Moses. And again, this is Moses. Basically, this task by God essentially is in some ways is Moses kind of redeeming himself for that accidental murder. That's kind of what
yeah,
we're
yeah,
bringing.
for sure.
Again, Moses does, and of course the turning a blind eye to all the suffering that he just kind of didn't do. It's kind of like it's a punishment that he's trying to balance the scales again. That's kind of what Moses is doing. So he has to eat some crow here, and it basically Moses is tasked with the hardest sell of saying, "Hey, remember all your Egyptian gods? Screw that noise. There's one big guy."
Mhm.
That's essentially what he's saying. It's a burning bush, too, guys. No, no,
Right,
no.
right.
No, no,
God.
but he's saying like the point is
Literally a
Moses.
burning bush. It's a personified anthropomorphic burning bush. Just picture that in your head. All right.
Yeah, but yeah, it's basically Moses tasked with yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well,
Yeah.
he- all right. Anyway, sorry. Well, okay.
No,
So
well,
basically, Moses is
I
tasked with the hardest
everything.
sell here. In
Hear me?
contrast, to his brothers. In contrast to his brothers'
Can
warm
you hear me now,
reception, he's saying,
Dragon?
"Let my people go."
Can you hear me now?
I Yeah, T. I think there might be a bit of yeah.
Okay,
I can
I'll
hear
go
you.
with
Can
it
you hear
now.
me?
Sure.
I think we're having a bit of a delay problem here, T. You might want to come back in or something. All right. What was that? Oh yeah. So he's making the demand of let. Yep. Well. All right. Okay. Anyway, so we're so basically he makes the demand of let my people go, and he's selling an almighty god versus the multiple Egyptian gods, which obviously is going to create. Take, we're having some audio problems here. You're going to have to. I, all right. What was I? Right. So we get the musical scenes. We get playing with the big boys now.
Okay, how about now? How about now? Can you hear me?
Um, Yeah, I can hear you. You still there?
Yeah, I'm still there. I'm just the weird thing was, Dragon, you were like asking me like if I was saying anything, and I wasn't even saying anything, but then I could tell that there was a little bit of a delay, so as long as we're good. Oh boy. And now he dropped out. Okay, folks. Well, gee. All right. I believe that wow. I believe that he was just on playing with the big boys now. So let me shoot. The thing is I don't even really hold on, folks. Sorry, let me get into my notes here. Sorry about this. So yeah, I guess just in general fact too, with the playing with the big boys now song, we just kind of just build up this sort of like brewing rivalry between Moses and Ramesses, where we have this kind of this eternal conflict of like Ramesses is just he's refusing to budge on the let my people go thing, and Moses, he is we get to see kind of like the eternal struggle that Moses is going through of look, Ramesses, like, I don't want to be causing your people all this harm, but by the same point, like, it's either your people or my people, and it's kind of like this, kind of this crazy sort of exchange of, sort of flipping back and forth, kind of like this ping pong of different kind of like suffering groups, and it really goes into some compelling territory of like trading human life. And as I've said throughout this podcast, folks, I really think it's just incredibly compelling with the way that it just very much sort of all plays out through. Hello?
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, I was just kind of talking about how it's kind of compelling how just on both sides of the fence, on both sides of the battlefield, as the playing with the big boys now song plays out, it's like we get to see the losses on both sides. You know what I mean? We get to see that not that through Moses's kind of victories, Ramesses is losing stuff, and that's not sitting well with Moses, and Moses is really kind of having a hard time morally with all this as this big song is playing out.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, just a great visually dazzling sequence as well. I love they made a really great choice where because famously the snake's supposed to eat the other snakes, but kind of did in the background. So we basically make it viable that Ramesses has a little bit of credence not to believe his brother, where he has Hoy and Hotep kind of refuting the claims by doing the magic on their own. And I love the story choice that they don't do anything supernatural. They're all smoke and mirrors, which is what this whole sequence is about. So we're just kind of flying in the face of the kind of physicalized magic versus actual kind of wonders.
Sure.
All right, so after that, it's basically after like brothers making a show of himself, and basically like Ramses is kind of throwing his big party here, and we get it's just kind of like kind of putting on a little show with his brother here, like okay, fine, I'll play your game, Moses. But anyway, so after all the fun and games of playing with the big boys, now of course a lot of Martin Short and Steve Martin magic going on there. Which, by the way, it's so funny. The brothers weren't allowed to record together, but these
Martin
two were.
Short and Steve Martin got to record together.
Yeah.
Dragon, Martin Short and Steve Martin are playing like about 50 miles away from me in October, and I really want to go, but I can't justify the cost of the Uber drive.
Right.
Anyways.
Right. So then we have
those two are still kicking it, man. They're still doing stuff together. All these years later.
Like a Netflix special too, I think.
Right.
All right, so then we have big. Oh, this is a great scene. We have the Moses rejecting Ramesses scene. So we have the big,
you take the lead on this one, Dragon.
Sure. So they're in the throne room. So they've kind of excused themselves from the festivities. That they're in the throne room scene. We have like the great full circle symmetry of things going on here, where they're in the same throne of their father's throne room, but now they have like two giant statues, and a little bit visually. Ramesses is bigger because of the pressure that his father put on him. He's trying to compensate and make things bigger and better. To appease his father, who's still in the foreground, like looking to him, like our father was a good man. That whole thing.
Oh.
See, that's what's great here. So I love throughout this scene, especially. There's a touch of Amon Goth from Schindler's List here, where again he's he's a bad guy who thinks he's civil and has the power to be benevolent. That's what he's doing here. You know,
Well, he's like he's not giving up his power not because he's evil, but because he's got a disjointed sense of pride and legacy attached to his name, and he feels like if he gives up the power, then he gives up the legacy. And that's kind of the fascinating thing about him. You know what I mean? He's all about like kind of like it's almost kind of like a Hamilton thing. It's like, how is history going to remember you? You know what I mean? And ironically, it's like with Ramesses, it's like history kind of remembers him as this dictator, whereas he was worried about coming off as weak. So it's like it's kind of like a morality play, if you will, with Ramesses as a villain.
Yes, and that's the thing. So I love that Ramesses, again, he's kind of suffering from the Egyptian fatal flaw. They're all about building things, but again, like no matter what it takes, which of course has a great cost to the slaves. That was the fatal flaw. The Egyptians, they were, they had again the great architecture. They have like the hieroglyphs. There's an artistry. There's something really great about the age-old Egyptian culture and the visuals and everything. But of course, there is that trade-off. Like it's built upon the backs of people who suffer, which is not cool.
Uh-huh.
And that's the thing, and the Alman Goth of it all for me is like in this scene where he's saying like basically Moses is trying to educate his brother because he loves his brother, he wants him on the same page. You're saying, look, it's like all of this is built on the blood of children, like our fathers slaughtered children, slaves. He just says it all nonchalantly again, where we have a big dramatic.
And that's kind of like a great echo of the Patrick Stewart Pharaoh earlier.
Exactly, that's the thing, and right, Tiki, I love in that moment though, in that callback. That's the difference. That's the diverging path where it calls back the scene where Moses, they were only slaves, where we see how Ramesses would have taken that news. He would have said, yeah, sure, they were slaves. Where Moses, again, he's just shaking his head and he's running out of the room, and even his mother couldn't comfort him on that one. It's a big one. Then we have the ring moment.
Right, his mother was just like, well, Moses, there's a balance to these things, and
we have the moment that really impressed Ray Fiennes when he was making the movie. We have the ring moment, which I gotta admit, it's super impressive. One of the best animated reaction shots in the whole film, where Ramesses is, and that's the thing. Ray Fiennes was so impressed like how they captured his performance because they videotaped the actor and everything. They applied also a visual to. So we have this moment with the ring where basically Moses, and again, this is the thing that crushes me because I love that ring note on the rewatch. Like, yeah, Moses did keep the ring, and he puts the ring back on the throne, which is kind of an insult because again, his brother gave him that ring, and he holds the ring. He looks, and just the animation on Ramesses' face just looks so hurt. So you returned for the slaves and not for me, not for your family, not just to return to me. And he grasps the ring in his hand, and he has to love the eyes of Ramesses where he looks up and he's just so determined.
Yes. I'm so glad you're mentioning this.
Because before that, he's just saying, yes, I had hoped.
And it's like, the great thing about this is that it's like, it's not quite malice. It's definitely angry. But by the same point, there's definitely like an air of like disappointment. It's almost kind of like an even more intense version of my favorite moment from How to Train Your Dragon with Stoic, where he's like right after the "I have no son" confrontation. It's like that kind of like subtle animation where it just has like five or six different gambits of emotional kind of like wrapped up into one moment.
And that's the thing. He goes from such vulnerability of, yes, I had hoped, and he doesn't even finish his statement because you can infer what he's going for here. And then, of course, he gives the look, and of course, they have that score underneath it when he looks like bump. So he's all business, and he's driven by again, I won't be the weak link. He's driven by not being the weak link, which is what fuels his stubbornness. And again, there's the life course of him becoming his father. Again, it's the perfect symmetry of he will not be the weak link, and of course that's what's weakening everything around him. That's what his downfall is going to be, trying to fulfill his father's destiny. Again, that break between the brothers is where really Act 2 ends, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would say so too. I would say that's a good call.
It brings us to Act 3.
Yeah, so Act 3, we have the oh boy, so we start with the blood in the river, right?
Yes, and also Tiki, any luck on the visual yet?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I completely forgot about the visual. My bad. Give me one sec.
So we have basically kind of the beginning of Moses, kind of like the second wonder, because the idea is like it's 10 plagues, otherwise in this case like 10 wonders, and the first one was the snakes, and then we get to the blood here. Famously, turning the water into blood, but not just any blood, the blood of the blood of the children, slaves you've slaughtered.
Okay, Dragon, like, holy shit! How did they get away with this imagery? I mean, this is bold, man. Like, this would be bold for anime.
Oh, you know it. It's again they got away with it because it's the Bible, Tiki.
I guess so, man. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy that this movie exists, but I mean, the imagery, the fact that it's so palatable and relatable just makes it all the more powerful. You know what I mean? It's just like it's very much like, I mean, this must be the type of movie that scarred kids with moments like this, Dragon. It's gotta be.
I love that they don't take it lightly though. Where again,
They really don't.
where again, it's blood. It has like the dense. They got the density of blood in the
Uh-huh.
animation. It's not just red water. And they look at him. Of course, it's like like Ramesses' son puts his hand in the water at the same time. So it's like it's the message of the blood on your hands could be the blood on your own child's hands, which of course is an even darker context given how that turns out. But I love that basically the message of the blood is that it's Ramesses' true legacy, the legacy of the Egyptian people, of the pharaohs before him, are the dead that the pyramids and everything are built had broken their backs on. It's the blood of the people who've toiled and you punished unfairly. That's what your legacy is, and you're swimming in it right now. And again, it's the warning. And honestly, what is it? It's kind of the warning for the last wonder, for the plague of death. That's what it's ultimately it's ultimately a warning for that right now. Like, this is what your destiny is going to be if you don't stop now. Of course, there's a blood correlation because we use the blood of the lambs later on. So again, blood is a theme and a big symbol right here.
Yeah, yeah.
And the idea is like and I love that I love that Hut and Hotep, and I love how we use these guys. Where again, they kind of try to disprove it. So again, we believably see why Ramesses is kind of like still kind of a doubter, because one, he's motivated by I will not be the link with stubbornness, but beyond that, we have like he's clinging to anything right now. Where they basically do like a little watercoloring trick. It's like, see, it's just red water. Ah.
Yeah, like the whole river is red food coloring essentially.
Pretty much. So of course, we also have like Moses kind of expounding the true power and faith message. Where again, like Aaron, his other brother, like, look, guys, I know things look bad right now. They're going to double the workload. It's going to be really bad. It's going to be really harsh. Some of us might even
Uh,
die. But they can't take away your faith. You got to have some faith, guys. It's the one thing. Yeah, it's a powerful thing it's just willpower and basically being rewarded with these guys having the sheer willpower and the sheer will of like some faith in something higher than yourselves, faith in that things will get better, ultimately gets rewarded by God and the wonders and such. Is kind of what gets them to the promised land, essentially. So that's all kind of nice.
yeah, there's a lot of powerful messages of perseverance and being the best self you can be. And I mean, it's just there's so many thick and juicy layers to this movie, Dragon.
So then we get just to summarize a little bit, we get
Yeah,
the
yeah.
plagues. So we get the plagues, and of
Oh
course
man.
we see a montage of essentially 9 to 10 plagues. It's really 9, of course. We're building to the 10th deadly
And this is
plague.
this is another thing where I'm just sitting there watching it and I'm just like, man, I don't even know how I got through this movie as a kid, man. This is some scary shit.
Now, Deliver Us and the Lullaby basically meld. A lot of people just meld together Deliver Us and the Lullaby. So basically, the opening song and
Uh,
this are probably the best songs in the whole movie. So this the Plague song is it's basically a
the
reprise
play
of all.
song is very good for sure.
The Plague song, it's also kind of a reprise of All I've Ever Wanted. Basically, Moses was trying to convince himself of the status quo before he kind of realized what his origin was. So we have this. We see like obviously we had the water with we saw the blood, we saw the frogs. We see like frogs hopping all around. We see animals and livestock. The livestock dropping dead. We have boils. Basically, people like kind of like they're kind of become plagued and everything. Like have these purple boils on them and everything. It looks really nasty. Uh, it's raining fire. It's literally raining fire. We got locusts, and then we have one of the coolest ones. We have darkness, just dark matter. We have like great shot. We see like the slaves in their community. It's all light and everything. We just see nothing but darkness on kind of the Egypt. So it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So really good
And again,
staging.
as all this is going on, Dragon, the most powerful visual contrast is like Moses is not enjoying a second of this shit.
I feel that's so important because then you lose sight if it can turn into like a thing where it's like it's almost like comic book Civil War versus the movie Civil War for
Right, where it's like
Captain
I feel like we're kind of treading a dangerous territory of like, look how cool all these set pieces are. But no, I think the powerful thing is like, first of all, I don't think I'd classify the set pieces as cool. As I keep emphasizing, there is definitely an era or an element of like, kind of like these set pieces being traumatizing, and we feel that through what Moses is going through and through the emotion on his face as he's having to inflict all this shit on his brother's people.
And his brother's just questioning, why are you doing this? Like, what did I do to you? And essentially that, because again he's coming from, again, I understand where Ramsey's coming from, because I love that Ramses question why his brother hates him so, and Moses just kind of caught in the middle of God's war on Ramesses, essentially. He's the bearer of the bad news here, and he feels really bad about it. And that's the thing. It's kind of taken, like, Ramesses, we're framing it through the brotherly context, where, again, Ramesses and Moses were in a good place in Act 1, but still the idea was there that my brother always gets me into trouble, and I'm always getting blamed for things. And essentially, like, Ramesses is getting into trouble because of his brother, but again, his brother is putting in a good word for him. So all of this. So again, it's kind of like at its core, it's kind of like the whole Better Call Saul thing, where we have like at its core, it's Chuck was always jealous that Jimmy made his mother laugh. That was always kind of what it was, and that's kind of what we have here at its core. It's the fact that Moses is continuing to get him into trouble and kind of ruining things for him. But again,
right.
It's the deep layer of it right there. It's, again, the color contrast and throughout all this is great with the red and the blues, and the fact there's looking at each other through all of this. And we do some phenomenal fade outs. And of course, like the big things, like when we do this headshot, we see each brother appear on both sides of their head, and like, it's just tremendous, folks. It's great stuff.
The animation in this movie, it's like we could just, like, if we sat here and analyzed every frame and every technique, we'd just be here all day, because it's just like, it is very much a masterstroke in 2D animation. It really is. It's just, like, watching this movie again just makes me sad that the art of 2D animation, at least in the States, at least in Western animation, just never got off the ground after the early 2000s.
Right. So then all of this builds to essentially the Passover section of Exodus, which I love the Passover segment, by the way. Passover.
This is kind of like an Infinity War / leftover situation here, Dragon.
Essentially it is, yeah. So we have a payoff to the earlier conversation between Moses and Ramesses, where the idea is, like, after Father would let him have it, they go to kind of this section where literally it's like the statues of the pharaohs, where he's like literally sitting in his father's lap, where they would they would kind of chat about, like, oh man, they really let you have it, didn't they? They kind of reminisce about the good times. So again, this place where they were both really vulnerable and really real with each other. We're doing that again after all of this bad blood between the two brothers has kind of come about, and they're both reminiscing about switching the Egyptian gods' heads on the statues, and
it's such a sad moment, because it's just like, it's not going to work out, right? It's like the bad blood between, like, Dragon, there's literally rivers of bad blood between these two, literal rivers of bad blood between.
And we had that poor schlub who slipped and he fell in the water. That's the traumatizing part of that, by the way. When Murray falls in the blood, he's like, oh god.
So it's like you watch this and you see them kind of just rekindling the spark, but the tragic thing is, it's like, it's not going to work out, and it's like, it's almost kind of like you're just sort of like delaying the inevitable, and it's got such a human tragedy element to it.
And real quick, also, again, of course, speaking of all this blood, Elektra would be getting a kick out of this.
Oh my god! Oh look, Matthew, we have a whole river to go splishy splat.
This would be Elektra's Lion King. Let's face it. Anyway, so, her Hakuna Matata would be the blood segment. Anyway.
Oh my god.
Okay, but in all seriousness, though, but yes, you're right, Dave. There is a great tragic element within the story between the brothers here, and I love there's that it's almost never too late moment. There's kind of it's a never too late message between them here. They both want to end things.
No, I kind of disagree. I'm sorry. I think the message of the scene is like sometimes it is too late as much as you don't want it to be.
Well, no, I'm saying they want it. They want to get over it, but it's not going to happen. It's not in the cards for them. They both want.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's almost a never too late message.
Right. Right. Yeah.
That's the thing. It's almost like, again, it's very kind of Civil War-esque, like the movie version, where it's, like Tony and Steve Rogers, where again they just want to reach a peace agreement here, but again, there's always something in the way. There's a stubbornness in one party, and there's just like there's an element that's just not going to change.
He killed my mom thing, which didn't help matters at all.
Yep. So again, but importantly, again, with all of this, again, we use a story from the past here where, again, Moses got Ramses out of trouble. So in the aftermath, again, like right now, where, again, Moses is the guy trying to get Ramses out of Dodge. He's like, please, just let him go. I just want to put an end to this. You just got to let the people go, Ramses. Can't we just work together on this? Mm-hmm. And Moses warns that the reason he's coming to him right now is like the last plague is the most devastating plague of all. You do not want this to happen. Just please let me help you. It's a really great scene. And we then have the haunting. This to me is one of those haunting moments in the entire film. And beyond my favorite.
What I love about this moment is that like it's not as visceral and over the top of a set piece as some of the other stuff. But it's haunting in an entirely different way.
It is. So again, you take my favorite scene with just how impactful the earlier scene with Seti is, and you basically this is the ultimate payoff to it in the third act, where basically Moses. I feel so bad for everybody involved here because Ramesses' son comes into place and says, "Yeah, you're the guy who's causing all that." Yes, and one has to wonder why. So he gives him the warning and everything, and Ramesses gets really fired up because he will not bow down to this unrecognized God figure. So he's basically saying, that's a great. I want to make sure I get it right here. Essentially says something along the lines of, "My father had the right idea. I should finish the job, and there shall be a great cry in all of Egypt that there hasn't or ever will be again." Where basically, as he's saying, he's like Moses, like, "Please, Ramesses, don't stop, don't say this." He's basically mirroring what's on the wall, on the very important wall behind them, with all the big hieroglyphics that have shaped Moses' destiny about his origin. And of course, as he points down, we mirror like basically. Ramesses has fully become his father, but an even worse version of his father.
Yeah.
And he's pointing, and of course, we have this great moment. Oh my God, it's like the punch of this moment, man, where it's we reveal Moses just this horrified reaction. I just can't believe what my brother's become. You're like, I can't save him now, and I don't want to be in this position.
And
but
again,
of course,
the heartbreaking thing about this is that it comes like literally like right after the moment where they're like briefly reconnecting as brothers and reminiscing about old times.
And the haunting thing is that his son is like in the middle, like in Moses' position where he have a baby being thrown to the crocodiles, and of course, like he's right there in between, being caught in history repeating itself in a big tragic way. So this is the tragedy of it all unfurling right now. Like my own brother has, he's basically like the thing that Moses here is like my own brother has made the genocidal call that birthed me in the first place. How much more poetic can you get, really? So
you would almost think that the story came out of the Bible or something, Dragon.
Yeah, crazy, right? All right, so then we hit to the other, of course, the literal Passover of it all, where God has informed Moses of a way of protecting the slaves from the snap, essentially, where it's it's going to be the death of the firstborn child, which means you take a lamb's blood, you paint it over the doorways, and you'll be passed over by the death plague. And of course, this leads to just the ultimate tragedy. Where, and again, the fact that they got away with this, one, we do in a really creepy, again, like a really.
They're not only killing kids; they're killing a bunch of kids, and they're killing the kids like, I mean, relatively speaking, on camera.
Well, here's the thing, Tiki. So what we do here is, again, it's kind of an Infinity War thing, where again, like we have these really haunting moments where they're going off screen, and
I feel like this is a step above Infinity War because we're literally seeing the life fade from these kids.
Well, not exactly. Here's the thing. So we're doing it in a different clever way here, where they're going off screen like they're doing something, and of course we have a symbol in the scene of the death. It's kind of like it's very much like Robin's Reckoning from Batman the Animated Series, where again you'd imply the death in a horrific way that is more impactful than if you saw the death. That's kind of what's happening here, where kid's carrying a pot, he goes in the other room, you hear the pot drop, like crash. Of course, basically the body's falling limp to the ground. That's what we're not seeing, but of course, all of this, the point is we're dodging around that so we can see the ultimate horrifying thing, which is Ramesses' son dead on a table.
Yeah, God. It's just
I completely forgot that they got away with like I knew there was
got balls, man.
Tiki, here's the thing. Of course, I've seen the movie a couple times. Don't get me wrong, but again, rewatching it, you kind of watch it in spaces. Like, let's face it, it's a good movie. It's just something like I'm not opposed to going back to it, but something like go back when you're in a mood for it. So,
I mean, that's exactly what I was talking about off the top, Dragon. It's a very, very heavy movie. You know what I mean? So it's like it's one of those things that you almost kind of appreciate from afar.
Yeah, it's not exactly as jovial as El Dorado.
No, not exactly, not exactly.
But that's the fact of the matter is, again, like I completely forgot. I knew there was gonna be like he was gonna be like dead and covered in a sheet, but no, what they do to is one, we show the body being covered by the sheet, and the kid again, we see the kid like basically the sheet forms around the kid, so he's cradling his dead son, so unconsolable. Just there's again, his brother is just devastated, saying, "Your people are free to go," and he's like, get out. But then we have this great shot, like the white of Ramsey's eyes, just looking like he's not finished, man. He wants revenge, and so and again, and of course, as Moses is walking out, we transition with Moses just feeling like utterly devastated by what he's done to him.
Yeah, okay, and the voice acting by Val Kilmer just completely sobbing is just haunting, Dragon.
He's sobbing in that studio. He brought himself to some really great emotional places in this movie. So then we have the big famous Red Seas moment. Party of the Red Seas. Yeah. So
this is like kind of like the big set piece that any good Ten Commandments movie has to end out on, and I don't think it disappoints at all.
Okay, fun fact. So this sequence is 4 minutes and took 2 years to animate just right.
I mean, I'm not surprised, man, because they go all out with it.
They do, and basically this. I like that they added more stakes to the spectrum. It's been a long while since I really watched the Ten Commandments. I mean,
I've never seen the Ten Commandments.
And when I say I watched the Ten Commandments, I mean like I haven't watched it all the way
like
through.
Bits and pieces of the Ten Commandments. Like basically, the most I know about the Ten Commandments is like parodies, like the Pinky and the Brain parody of the Ten Commandments.
I've seen the money shots of the Ten Commandments. I've seen all the good parts. I haven't watched it all the way through, so I can't really, in all goodness, say I've watched the Ten Commandments. I've seen the money. I've seen the important parts of the Ten Commandments. And to my recollection, what I like what we do here is we kind of add some stakes to the spectacle, where we see Moses essentially leading his sheep to the Promised Land, and we have kind of God raining in the fire tornado and everything. He's buying him some time. But the point is, I like there's a bit of a run through the thing than just kind of a walk. So that's kind of neat. So basically Ramesses, again, to the end. We have Ramesses' refusal to be the Wink Link, which leads to the ultimate fate of the two brothers here, where they go through the Red Seas, and of course, ultimately, the fate is that Moses. To me, I read it as, you can buy me and tell me what you feel about this, Steve. To me, I think the fate of Moses is that Moses sacrificed his ego to a higher power. Again, he was kind of like the prince, just kind of following along the status quo. Sure. He sacrificed his ego to a higher power, being God, and higher cause, if you want to look at it that way. Saving the slaves, saving the Hebrew people. He saved people, which led to his redemption for being accountable for a flawed system. He took accountability for a flawed system. He took a higher responsibility, and therefore, he survived, and he made it to the end there. And again, he's rewarded for all of that. And so that's Moses's his fate. And on the flip side of things, we had Ramesses' fate. Ramesses, he remained true to the status quo, and refused the change, and this led to it led to nothing but death and suffering. And I think his punishment for all this, and the ultimate fate of Ramesses, is that, and you could read it both ways here, because there is kind of like I'll tell you in a second, is that Ramesses, he's left alone and separated from his brother yet again. Basically, the heartbreaking moment of Act 1, he's forced to relive yet again, where he's like alone calling out for Moses, like, Moses.
Yeah.
We mirror that moment, but there's also a fan theory by, I believe, the directors even. So the fan theory is that, I don't know how official it is. I think the directors are kind of confirming it, but again, they're pretty much saying it's true, but you could read it both ways, where Moses is imagining his brother saying that Ramesses probably died when the water. It's like how's he going to get back to shore in that time?
Interesting.
Well, the point being, like, he's also kind of stranded
More.
there, so he might be dead either way. So the point being,
I mean,
Ramesses is
honestly, the movie does kind of pull audio tricks like that, kind of like throughout the runtime. So I really wouldn't put it past the director to do something like that.
and either way you want to look at it, I mean, he is kind of stranded on that rock, so maybe he just dies stranded if he doesn't just die in
Sure.
the point is, like, we get that Moses callback, which again, Moses was there when he was a screaming Moses, so the point is it would be in Moses' mind. So the point being, however you read it, Ramesses is left alone, kind of dead, suffering by his own hand, and emphasis on alone. He's
But
lost his son,
on
he
a
lost his
lighter
brother.
note, from Ramses being a lone dragon, just really quick to kind of backtrack, because I love this moment in terms of like, yeah, that's something you can only do in animation. I love the whale.
What here's the thing, it's like a whale shark specifically.
Well, whatever it is, you know what I'm talking about. I love that moment. That moment is just so whimsical.
You're right, Tig. It is whimsical. I bring them because, believe it or not, some people take issue. I guess some purists, some whale purists, take issue with
Oh,
the whale.
whatever. You know what? I don't even get me started on
I know.
it.
I bring it because it's ridiculous. Because, like, does it really matter if there are whales in the Red Sea? Does it really matter? You know, it's like people are saying there aren't any whales in the Red Sea. Yeah, it's a whale shark, but who cares? Anyway.
It looks cool. It's symbolic.
Yeah.
Anyways, can you hear me? Okay, just checking. Okay. Let's
Right. So then we have the Ten Commandments moment at the very end here. So, and this is
Oh my
Spielberg
god!
wanted.
And this is just like this is such an epic ending, man. This ending just gives me chills.
Yeah, and this is a Spielberg note. He wanted this to be. You have to end right here at the Ten Commandments part. You have to end like right here, and I love that.
I love how it's just like we know where the story goes from here, and we know that there is like a big moment that we have yet to see, but we know how it plays out. We know kind of like the gravitas of the world and the gravitas of the story that we've already been presented. And so we can only kind of just imagine in our own mind how this moment is going to play.
I'm going to hit you with a radical take on this scene. I don't know how radical. I'm just going to hit you with something. You tell me if it makes any sense.
All right.
So, we end with Moses with the Ten Commandments, of course, with an eager crowd waiting to listen. They're finally going to listen to the mouthpiece of God with the tablets of things written from God. Big moment. We kind of have 10 plagues to 10 commandments. It's really good. 10 is kind of God's number, I guess. Big fan of 10 that week, I guess. And we have this. I think there might be a broader implication. This is my read. I want you to get your thoughts on it. So I think the broader implication with all of this, by the end here, is that I think that God has a soft touch, but he has as kind of a kind, soft touch, but in terms of how he reaches out to Moses and everything, in terms of like how he's going to approach people and loving towards the people and towards his sheep and saving everybody. So he's got a soft touch in that regard, but he has an Egyptian-like follow through. For a greater good, because again, like those plagues are kind of like, again, he's kind of reflecting.
Right. I see what you're saying there, Dragon. It's very much kind of an interesting kind of like, there's no real religion to the God in this movie. It's kind of like, if anything, it's kind of like a blend between the Christianity God and kind of like the Egyptian version of the gods. But I like how it's just kind of like ambiguous. You know what I mean? It's its own thing. It's its own force of nature, and it doesn't really adhere to any one religious group in this movie.
And that's the interesting thing, is that, again, it's a question of, well, the Egyptians, it would be kind of justice for what they had put the slaves through with kind of an equal show of force, but by the same token, like, is it just kind of like how ruthless, like, again, like, is he showing like due force, or is it just like, God being unforgiving? Again, they're not taking a stance on, which is more interesting. So something kind of occurred to me like on the rewatch, like, yeah, the 10 plagues of the 10 commandments, like, yeah, it is kind of, I wonder if there's kind of a message there. So yeah, that's where the movie ends.
All right. Well, Dragon, I got to say, in spite of a couple technical issues we've been having, I thought this was a wonderful conversation, my friend. I thought we got into some really good, interesting kind of territory and spiritual and religious discussion. And I just loved revisiting this movie, man. I really did. I'm almost kind of like beaming about it. It really does bring me back to like the good old days of 90s hand-drawn animation. Even stuff that wasn't done by Disney was just so good and so awe-inspiring. And this dragon, I really do think this it stands on the same shelf as anything that Disney's done, in all honesty. For me, it's so emotionally impactful. It's just like the imagery in it is just incredibly strong, incredibly vivid, and it's just a haunting story. And I'm almost kind of like amazed that this thing even exists because of how powerful it is, and how deep and complex and layered it all is. And it's a hell of a ride, man. It's a hell of a movie. It's like you said at the top of this, Dragon, you almost kind of wish that this would have started off DreamWorks instead of Ants, because it's such a better mission statement for an animation company. It's just like, yeah, like this is what we can do. This is like Dragon, as far as I'm concerned, this is the height of DreamWorks powers, and is, like I said, as much as I like How to Train Your Dragon, they've never exceeded this. They really haven't. Like, I'm gonna be bold and just say that. I mean, this is just absolutely next level filmmaking when it comes to the animation genre.
So I'd say that I agree with you, and this is one of DreamWorks' masterpieces. I even go as far as to say this is DreamWorks' Mask of the Phantasm. It's that good. I'd go as far as to say that. This is,
well, like I said, I mean, this is easily DreamWorks' Hunchback, if anything.
Sure, but I mean, in terms of like, compared with DreamWorks' movies, again, this is them kind of striking it right, and again, just kind of being like, one of the, again, kind of the. Well, I mean, one, it's also kind of like the best they've done in 2D as well. It's just, I don't know, there's something really, there's something phantasmy about this. Again, it's coming out in kind of that 90s period. I mean, I think, again, Hunchback's the proper comparison, sure. I don't know, there's something a little next level there too. It's something like, like in terms of like something that hasn't been replicated again. That's what I'm thinking. Like,
no, I hear you.
Anyway, point being, this movie, again, it's one of the few films that makes the Bible cinematic and compelling by boiling down the important stuff and the convoluted stuff to, again, as I said earlier, to a relatable human story with biblical heights. Where again, that's where you want the focus. That's where you have everybody's interest, because we're focusing on the two brothers. We're focusing on kind of our two leads, and what they're going through, and like how they're paralleling each other and all of that. And most, I think it goes without saying, this is the most well received and regarded of the DreamWorks 2D endeavors for a reason. Of course, beyond that as well, again, it still holds a candle, still up there, and definitely deserves to be kind of definitely deserves a revisit, because I feel it is well regarded. I don't think people really kind of revisit it. I think it's gotten lost in the shuffle these days. I'd agree with you there too.
I feel like it's one of those movies where everyone just kind of like remembers it, like, yeah, that was a good movie, and I was honestly kind of like one of these people, and I'm like, this is kind of like one of the reasons it's so fun to have this podcast, Dragon, is that we do get these excuses to just like go back and revisit these movies. And sometimes these movies don't really hold up as well as you want them to, but other times they just hold up like a freaking bottle of fine aged wine. And I think The Prince of Egypt is like I don't know, Dragon. I'm not going to make like a wine analogy here, because I don't know specific wines and everything, but it's a very fancy bottle of wine that's aged perfectly, and it's just about ready to be opened. And when you open it, it's just going to be all crisp and refreshing and perfectly aged and just perfectly seasoned. And yeah, wine analogies, woo.
But yeah, in regards to the theme, I think the film is somewhat about rebirth and reinvention. We see this through both arcs of Moses and Ramesses, and how they're kind of redefining themselves. And of course, Moses has definitely a rebirth, and Ramesses, and of course, it's kind of breeds kind of where their dynamic goes. And importantly, it's not preachy about again, it's not preachy. It's not preachy. It's a perfect arc and parallel of the brothers on diverging paths that they could not avoid. And that's where the movie's focus lies. It's just, there's a bit of magic in this film, a wonder, one could say. And I think a few wonders are accomplished in this movie. Wonders that have still that withstood the test of time, and definitely make this stand above the rest in a certain regard. Prince of Egypt, it's top tier animation. Most certainly, it's something special, folks.
Oh yeah. All right. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a happy Easter. I am going to be enjoying a stage production of Jesus Christ Superstar next week that I am very excited for, and I'm going to try and convince Dragon to do the 1973 version of Jesus Christ Superstar, the movie, for next year's Easter special, because I feel like that'd be very fitting. But in the meantime, folks, have a good night, and like I said, happy Easter.
Deliver us to the promised land.